Hi, I'm Phil, and I'm here to run you through a tutorial on using JuliaHub with RStudio. Now, we're going to have a slight focus on farmer workflows. So, we're going to work in accordance with the instructions provided in the Quick Start Guide, which is right here. So, this recording is intended to work alongside this document called the JuliaHub Quick Start Guide RStudio. And the first thing this guide covers is how do we know if an application started? Okay, and it also asks questions of how long it's been running, say the time of the job, and notifications about job expiring, and some other, and it goes on and on. Before we get into the document, though, I'd like to go over some of the basics. When you land in your Julia Hub instance, okay, you're going to have several things on your homepage. You're going to have your applications, right? Some of these you may or may not have, but this is the ones that this current instance has. You're going to have projects listed on the left side here and jobs on the right side. You're also going to have packages if you scroll down and updated packages, and then recent batch jobs. In this case, none have been performed recently. What's important to remember is we're going to focus on applications and jobs, but it's also important to remember that a lot of this is going to work in conjunction with projects, okay? And projects themselves have a dimension called access rights. Right? I can give someone edit or read rights to a project, and that will be important later on. So let's get into it. Click on Applications. We want to open RStudio and get to work on some R code. Well, obviously, we'll click Launch. Sure, we'll give it a moment to start booting up. Now, the question is, what happens when I click that Launch button? You see how it went from Launch to Connect, okay? Connect to what? Connect to an instance. Now that it's green, that means I can click on it and presumably go there. I click on Jobs, right? So when I click that Launch button, it created a job. Here it is. You see how it's running? 1:02 p.m. See the time here? 1:02 p.m. Now, if I look at completed jobs, I have all these other jobs here that I can query or examine. But right now, I'm looking strictly at active jobs. Notice also that it tells me the type of job, RStudio server. It's very explicit. This is helpful because you can filter, right, and sort. Anyway, if we go back to the application, I can now connect to this job. Now, notice something interesting. When I loaded this job, two things have changed. One, I'm no longer at the same URL, kcpgdev, kcpg-dev.juliahub.com. I'm no longer there. I have a different URL. Right? I have a different prefix to the original URL. So I guess you call it like the root URL. And I also have a name in the tab here. It says RStudio server. So here's my URL, which has some random prefix .apps.kcpg-devjuliahub.com. And then in the tab itself, it has a name RStudio server. All right, now this accords exactly with the documentation here saying, how do I know my application started? It says a new browser tab will rename to RStudio server and displays the following. What does it display? Path values and default functions instantiated upon loading RStudio IDE, and also a console, an environment, and a files tab. Okay, let's see what we got here. We have a console for R, environment, and files. You know, the usual plots, packages, viewer, presentation, etc. Now, in the environment, we have a stan R library path and a generic path. Okay, so these are set under environment values. For the environment specific functions, we have an authenticate function and a timeout function. All right, so these are instantiated upon loading. You don't have to worry about these or concern yourself with them in any way. Now, the next phase of this is a question about how long an application has been running. Right? If we were trying to query or extend a job. So back to jobs, remember, every time I load an RStudio server, I create a unique job. I see the job here. I have the option to click extend. Click extend. Add as many hours as I desire. Voila. Now, the next question that this documentation addresses is running out of time. If you run out of time in your RStudio server instance, you will have a modal pop out. About 10 to 15 minutes of idleness. Or excuse me, 10 to 15 minutes before you run out of time. It'll say, would you like to extend it, yes or no? Very straightforward. So that is fairly simple. Where things get a little more interesting is on files and folders across application sessions. My system is set up to load in my personal folder, data code. Your system will likely load up in the projects by name folder. Do you see what I just did? So I started in code. This is my code. These are files only for me. All right. These are my, as a user, authenticated with my username, Phil Verns. On this instance, this is what I have access to, what I can change, read, write, etc. All right. I cannot see your code. If you're authenticated as a user, I cannot see your data/code. Right. I mean, let me just type it here. Data/code. I cannot see that on your end. Okay. But if I go to projects by name, now I can see all the other users' projects. Now I may not, but these are projects that have been shared with me, right? So by having projects, there is a way for people to share code with me, right? That's why they work, and that's why they exist. Even so, within projects, we still have a file system that we can click through. So look what I just did. I clicked on my name, clicked on my demo project, and you see I have a CSV file, a blank R file, code, some local data, etc. These are all in a file system API. And notice how I'm clicking through the folders here. Now we're going to go to something a little more interesting. Projects, right? We talked about projects, which projects are visible and which ones are not. All these projects, everything is listed here. Any project that I have created, whether or not is active or not, or finished, is listed here under my name, under projects by name. But if I go to projects here, I'm going to introduce a new tab to you, a projects tab, and I click my projects, I only have 2 active projects. This can be confusing. Now, if I toggle all the other ones, I have a one-to-one match, right? So just be mindful that the UI here has filtering applied to it that will only show by default the active projects. So if you see a discrepancy between the project listed by name and those in the platform, it's because of these toggles. Now, one more thing I actually want to mention about this file system. If I'm in a project and I do have access rights, I can create and edit a file. So I can do new blank file, call it blank 2, right? Boom, I just added it. And that will persist across sessions, okay? So this change I made directly into the file system will persist. And if I gave a user edit rights to this demo project, he or she could also create files, edit these files, etc. If I only gave a user read rights in the case of collaborative editing or collaborative sharing, then he or she would only be able to read these files. Anyone trying to add a new file, you get an error. It wouldn't let you. Anyone trying to save to a file wouldn't let you. So the system would block you from doing that. So again, remember, there are 2 ways to work with files here. One is through projects by name, which is how you're going to do it predominantly. But it is possible to work on your quote-unquote own code instance personally in your data/code folder, okay? So that gives you some orientation about that. And just be mindful that when you look at projects, you have to make sure the filter for archive in general is on so that you have a one-to-one correspondence between what you see in projects and what you see in RStudio server. Now, the next question is about importing files and folders into application. And this is going to be using from within RStudio itself, okay? And here, it's very straightforward. You just click upload, all right? Now, in this case, we have the data code directory. We probably don't want that. We probably want to use projects by name, and then me, and then some, demo project, right? Choose that, and then choose a file locally to upload and upload it, okay? That's how you do it from within the RStudio IDE. There's another way to do it, which involves using a library package that's been pre-installed, and we'll get to that in a minute. But from within RStudio IDE, just simply use the upload button here. Very easy. And if you have, but again, it requires you to have edit rights to that project. So just remember, by default, I have quote unquote edit rights to my own code folder. But if I'm in a project, and in this case it's my name, so I obviously have access rights to it. But for a shared project, and I tried to upload a file and I did not have edit rights, the file upload would not work. Okay, just remember that. So let's keep going on. Now we're going to talk about the export. Again, this is very straightforward. Just click here more. Scroll down to export. Oops. let's export our blank files, right? And it'll give us a zip, and that's it. Very easy. For those of you who are familiar with RStudio, which I think all of you are, you already know this, but I just wanted to show that it corresponds to your JuliaHub RStudio instance. Nothing has been changed or mutated in that sense. It works as you're used to. Now, this is what's kind of cool to know, is that if you install an R package, right, as a user, so if I install an R package, let me just close this out. If I install an R, if I did an install.package, etc., right, and I from CRAN, I install a package from CRAN, what happens? Or you have some internally hosted repo. What happens? For all sessions that I use, that package will be available. In fact, we're going to use one that was installed previously. It's called JuliaHub Datasets. This was installed previously, this package. This is a proprietary package we use for data transfer between JuliaHub and RStudio server. And the question you have to ask is like, well, I don't have to install everything. No, you don't. This is actually really nice. So it remembers packages you installed. So if you have to install a package, that's fine. You install it, just invoke it with a library, and those functions will be available to you. You don't have to install packages every single time you start up your RStudio server. So there's a great instance of us invoking a package that was installed previously. This one I don't think is available by CRAN. It was likely pre-installed in your instance for you by when you were onboarded. So if we want to actually work with data sets in JuliaHub, that's where we're actually touching the next topic. Here are the data sets here. I have data sets are really the way we push and advocate, and going forward, it's really the best practices to use data sets rather than say directly uploading here, which works and is great. It's a lot better to use the data sets because you get versioning, okay, you get traceability. A lot of especially for versioning of data sets and traceability, you lose that when you hit the upload button. Okay, if you do direct upload here, you lose that. So if you want to preserve traceability, versioning, etc., especially when you're uploading data, I highly recommend using data sets. Code, different story. All right, the code, that's usually a different question. But when it comes to data, you really do not want to be moving data with the upload button here. You want to be using data sets. So the question then is, what is a data set, frankly, right? If I look at, say, my data sets are just data files. In your case, they're going to be predominantly CSV files or simulation results of some kind. Maybe they're from other applications. Doesn't matter. But they're going to be some sort of flattened format that is easily interpretable. And for sake of argument, just say it's CSV files that we're going to be working with predominantly. So if you notice, if I click on a dataset file, like CSV3, right, it doesn't really tell you like the file name or something, because you have to think of a data set itself as a wrapper. I actually named the file CSV3. That's the dataset name. It's actually not the file name. Okay, imagine the dataset name is like a wrapping paper around the file name. So if you have this wrapper around the file name, you then interface with that wrapper to quote unquote open the package, right, and find the contents within it. So just be mindful that when you're working with data sets themselves are not the file. You're going to have to you reference the file by its dataset, call it handle or name, but you're still going to have to name the file when you download it locally or you download it to RStudio. So we have to be careful to say that if I push any sort of data, if I import data, if I add a data set of any kind, right? And I upload my CSV file here, put a name there. I'm going to have to now pull it into RStudio Server by using the data set name, not the file name. Okay, I want to make that really, really clear. This causes a lot, can cause confusion between there's a distinction between the data set name and the file name. They are not the same. Data set name is a reference to a data set. The file itself is encapsulated. It's like a vitamin, you know. The data set is the shell of the encapsulating material, and the vitamin or the file is like the vitamin contained inside of it. Okay, and it's digested when you import it to use some sort of metabolic analogy. So if we're going to use data sets from JuliaHub, do we need our package? The answer is yes. I already invoked it here by using JuliaHub data sets. This is the package we use so we can talk to this. Okay. Now, this has already been done for you. So this whole thing of the course page, downloading it, installing this AWS S3 thing, invoking this function right here to install the package. This has all already been done. It's only done once. So, let's do some basic functions to get you an idea of how this interfaces within RStudio. So we could do datasets list. Datasets. Okay, let's see what this has in it. So, yeah, here it is. So it shows quite a bit of information. Much of it you don't need, but you do see how it does that blob store. It uses blobs to encapsulate. But look at all the information you have when you have a data set, right? You have the owner, you have the bucket in which it was stored in the database, you have the version, you have the number of versions. There might be multiple versions. It tracks them, right? This is why you want to use data sets. So it's imperative to think about like why you're using this, because it has this nested structure with all this information that keeps track of things for you when it comes to any sort of validation question down the line. All right. So we got to list all the data sets, and now we want to create a filter. We have to filter the list. In my case, I'm just going to highlight this code here and copy it here. Paste it here. And what name do I use? I actually see, you see it has $$ name. That's what I'm looking for. See the dollar name? It's a big CSV. Look at all of them have some sort of name. Name, DM test, name, data 01, name, data 02, etc. So let's do, what was that? Big CSV, what was it called? Name, this is 17. No, I don't want to use that one. I want to use the one I made. QC CSV, I made that. Okay, so start for the first, there's a list of 18 data sets. I'll start. So, well, it's 18 long, but it's indexed right from 0. So QC CSV is the name. So I'm going to do QC CSV. QC underscore CSV. Voila. That's it. Bingo. Beautiful. Okay. So that worked as we expected. And if we type the name test data, we get the data set information. So we got the right thing. So now we want to do, and this is where things get interesting, is we want to download it. So we want to pull this data set. Remember, taking a data set from here, we want to pull it into my project. And let's say I want to pull it into JuliaHub demo project. All right. So the code here to do that, it's right here from this Julia start. You can just copy this. And this is important to pay attention because there's a detail here I want you to catch. So I have download function. Obviously, downloads what? Download test data, the data set, local path. The only thing you have to worry, don't worry this home JRun. This is the stuff you have to think about. This is the quote unquote local path. Now I want to put it in JuliaHub demo project. So in my case, I'm going to have to change this path just a little bit, but I'm also going to see how there's a file name here. You have to make sure to put that file name in. Remember how I said the data set does not include a file name? Make sure to have a file name in there. All right. So I would, in this case, because I use the convention of using the same data set name as file name, I would call this QC underscore CSV.csv. But I don't want this to be in data/code. I want this to be in data projects by name, Phil Burns, data product. So let's try to make that work. Projects by name, Burns, demo project. And look what happens. Voila. It loaded up, downloaded it. So now we have it within the demo project. Now, as you notice, I just downloaded the data set locally. I would not encourage you to put your data sets in your projects. This is intended as a way to communicate between JuliaHub and your R console. So if you're going to be sharing code, if you're going to be using your projects and keeping your data sets in your project and they're big files, we're talking, I mean, this is a small file, it's 205 bytes, but if we're talking 10, 20, 100 megabytes or more, you're going to create problems, okay? You're going to create problems with synchronization later on. The project's design is not designed for huge data sets. What you do is if you need to pull a large data set in, pull it into your project, use it, right, as needed, put the result back up into as a new data set, which we're going to do, and then ideally get rid of this or work with it in some temporary folder that you can dispose of somehow or archive efficiently. You don't want to be putting large data files here. So this is something to be very careful with in terms of your workflow, is pulling large files. If you're small files under a megabyte, 5, 10 megabytes, fine. But when they get big, you're going to create issues. All right, so we need to be very mindful of the size issues when working with data sets in projects. If you're working in code, though, here, and you want to pull big stuff in, go ahead. So that might be another alternative, too, is say, I'm going to pull into my code folder. There's no synchronization issue with your code folder. This is just yours. So I could pull in, you want to pull in a 5 gigabyte file, go ahead, right? Just change your folder, do the same thing and just change it to data code. QC, I already have one there, but I did it again. Actually, a slightly different name. So there it is, right? I mean, I can just pull it right in there. And this is a safe place. If you really, and then in your R code, you just change your path. So really, if you're really going to be working with large files and data files in general, if you have to really work with them, put them in your personal code. I know there's validation stuff. We can talk about that directly if you have questions. But I'm telling you right now, if you're pushing large data sets into your projects, you're going to break it. You're going to break it. By large, I mean the simulation results. Strictly speaking, things in the hundreds of megabytes, especially, it's just not going to work. So this is the last step, right? I want to get my data set out of RStudio server, and I want to put it back into a data set in JuliaHub. And it's just an upload function. Okay, very easy. I'm going to copy this, paste it here, voila. Oops, paste it here. Notice again, distinction between file name. Actually, you know what? I'm just going to run this. I'll be a little lazy. I'm just going to run this from here. Don't change the path too much. QC underscore CSV. Okay. Data set name. Call it QC output. Right. Now, it's interesting. If you upload a data set and there are multiple data sets, it will automatically version them with the same name. I'm not going to bother with that right now. And you actually have the option when you upload data sets to replace a data set with version 1 or just automatically update a data set. If you replace a data set, you wipe the old version, you get new version 1 with the same name. If you just have the default updated data set, when you upload a new data set, it just indexes to another version, but it tracks the prior version. But just for our sake, I'm just going to have a data set name that's distinct here. Okay. Done. And you see, it gives you size and a version. All right. Let's check that out. oops. Yeah, here we go. QC output, just done. So you see how that works? Here, no, it talks about sharing data sets, right? The toggle here is very straightforward. You click on a data set sidebar. In the sidebar, you hit metadata, and you change the access rights, and you say view. Then everyone around the org can view this data set. Okay, that's basically it. So it's very straightforward. Um, the final thing to talk about here is using command line tools, right? And that means when you're an RStudio server and you need to run commands on the OS, that's in terminal. Okay, so like I am in like this is where I am. All right, so those are Linux commands. That's where I am. So there you are in terminal. You got to run non-mem, etc. There you go. This has been a very quick and dirty tutorial. I kept it within half an hour. That's even too long by my standards, but I want to be somewhat comprehensive. I'm Phil Verne, sales engineer. If you have more questions, email me. Contact us at JuliaHub if you need help. We are here to help, and we're always evolving and growing our product, and your feedback is deeply appreciated. So thank you for your time.